Thanks, guys. All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me. Yes to those online, but thank you for everyone who came out in person. Just as a reminder, Adorama does these events quite often, and so you guys can come join for free and watch and learn. And I think it's better because you can see things differently in person. You can ask questions. So I hope to be doing more of these in the future, and hopefully you'll come see me in real life. And good job for those of you who did. So today, I'm actually going to start with a little bit of, we'll call it a lecture. It's not. I just want to show you some real examples of what I'm talking about, because today we're talking about commercial versus editorial photography. These are terms that get thrown around a lot, and they do have real meaning behind them. But have you heard people say, like, oh, that's so editorial? What does that really mean? And I want to talk about it a little bit. What is the difference between the two aesthetically? So what makes up a commercial shot? What makes up an editorial shot? What about the thrust behind them, like the purpose of the different images? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate some commercial versus editorial shots where I'll take very similar lighting setups and make just little tweaks, and it will go from commercial to editorial. And I'll show you how it's a little bit more about the thought process and purpose behind the photo. I'm going to be using specifically solely continuous light today. And one of the reasons that I wanted to do that is since we're talking about commercial photography, so much of my commercial work recently is using continuous light. And there is one major reason why. Do you guys know why? Motion. Like when I'm doing commercial work, if I'm shooting an ad campaign, they're spending a ton of money on the models, the hair and makeup, the production, maybe it's the set, like they're putting a lot of money behind it. And they want to get some sort of video out of those days as well. Even if it's just behind the scenes, or maybe it's little snippets for social media. But more and more, I would actually say a majority of my commercial clients want me to shoot continuous, so they have that flexibility. So that's one of the reasons we're going to be using it today. By the way, my model here is the one that you see on the screen for the presentation. She has actually been in both commercial and editorial shoots that I have done. So I wanted to have Rochelle here because she's done all of that for me. All right, so again, thank you to both Nanlite and Adorama. That's why I'm here today. They're both supportive not only of me, but the industry. So thanks, guys. Okay, so let's start in the beginning. When I talk about commercial versus editorial photography, the whole idea behind it is that intent matters. What are the photos going to be used for? That's the difference. It's not necessarily what the photo looks like, because a commercial photo could look like anything, and an editorial photo could actually kind of look like anything. It's what is the end purpose of them. So I put this up here. I'll just give you the gist of it. When we talk about commercial photography, it means that the purpose behind it is to sell a product of some sort. It could be skincare. In that lead shot that I showed you with Rochelle, we were photographing for a hairline. And we were photographing, it was hair dye and hair dryers and combs and all of that kind of stuff. But the main goal is to highlight the features of something that you're trying to sell. Now, typically you're gonna see it in ads. It could be billboards, it could be social media ads, it could be magazine ads, it doesn't really matter. But when it comes to commercial, the benefit is you make money. Like when you hear commercial, you go, yes, I'm gonna get paid well. But what are you giving up to get paid? He says dignity, which is not always incorrect. But the other part of it is you are not in control of the creative direction. Somebody else is usually dictating what the photos look like. It doesn't mean you can't have input, but very often when I do commercial shoots for a client, somebody else already told me roughly what they want the lighting to look like and what the clothing should look like. And with the shots overall, I mean, sometimes they come in and they've literally sketched out what the shot should be, and I'm basically recreating a vision that they had. It could be that specific. So the downside of creative is that you're not flexing of commercial is you don't get to flex your creative muscle. Like you're not there to show off all your creative techniques. You're there to take what they want from an idea to a reality. Now, the other side of it would be editorial. And this is where you get to be creative. The whole purpose is to express a concept, an idea, tell a story with images, be creative, evoke emotion. It's all of that. It's all the feels, all the creativity, all the connection. And usually, if it's an editorial, typically we're talking about either a physical magazine, an online publication, or just for your portfolio. It could be for any of those things. But you're the boss for the most part. Like, meaning it's meant to showcase your style and your vision. That being said, if you're shooting for a real magazine, you still want to be you still want to be your style, but you want to keep in mind the look and feel, like the audience of the magazine. So for example, there's this one, I think they're Norwegian magazine, that everything they do is like bright colors and gels and weird headpieces and all this stuff. That's great, but I wouldn't then go put that and try to be in Vogue with that. That's just not their aesthetic, right? So yes, you still do your style, but you fit it to the publication. So you still kind of have a boss. Like, there's still somebody that you got to please. But if you shoot editorial for your portfolio only, then you only have to make yourself happy, which is why I do editorial shoots. I call them creative play days. I do them probably about once a month, maybe once every other month. It depends, because then there is no boss. We just make art, and it's wonderful. But guess who's getting paid? No one. No one gets paid on those days. Similarly, when I shoot an editorial for, I'm talking like a legit magazine, like names of magazines you've heard of. They pay me hardly anything. I don't know, $500, $600, $1,000 maximum. And that's not pay that I get to keep. That goes towards, like, did I pay for retouching? Did I buy lunch? Did I have to rent a studio? Like, so just so you know, editorial means, yay, creative freedom. Boo, no money. Whereas commercial is, yay, lots of money. They tell me what to do. So that's the big difference between the two of them there. So when I talk about commercial versus editorial, the big question is, who is the client? Is it you? Is it a magazine? Is it an ad agency? Is it a particular brand? Like, who are these photos for in the end? So I always think of it like this. When it's commercial, we have like serious meetings before commercial shoots to discuss every question you can imagine. So I'm asking questions like, okay, who are you advertising for? Like, so is it a specific age group of people, a certain demographic? Like, what do they find to be cool? Because you'd want to show that in the makeup and in the clothing and in the lighting. Like, what would they find pleasing? You'd also be asking questions about, tell me about this brand. Like, is it a happy-go-lucky, upbeat brand? Or is it luxury and serious with the mood of, like, I'm too good for you? It's like, that's what's supposed to come across in the images. So you're asking these sorts of questions, and we usually do these pretty in-depth meetings to figure this out, and then we plan it out in detail. So even though I'm saying that commercial is paid, you work for it. Like, it's not a show up and shoot. Like, you do a lot of calls beforehand to plan it out. And so it's things like brand colors, but also maybe compositions. It'll be like, oh, it's gonna run in a billboard. Then I have to shoot images that fit that aspect ratio. Oh, it's gonna also be vertical reels and stories. Okay, now I gotta do vertical for that. So it's lots of planning and thinking. Whereas editorial is a little different of what I'm thinking about. Because I'm thinking about, like, if it's a magazine, what are this year's trends? Like, what's in for 2024? Can I show that in the magazine? If I'm going to be published in a Harper's Bazaar or an Elle, any of those magazines, for example, my clothing and things featured in it do have to be on trend. Like, that's something I have to consider. Even if fashion's not that important to me and I just want to make pretty pictures, well, then you're not going to be in a magazine. So I have to think about those things. I'm also thinking about my style. How does it match up with the magazine? Those sorts of things. So two very different approaches. But in both, no matter whether it's commercial or editorial, I build something called mood boards. And I'm going to show them to you. I'm going to show you an example of them. But basically, a mood board is going to be like a little roadmap of the visuals in the shoot. So, like, what should the hair look like and the makeup look like and the lighting look like? Like, it helps me plan it out so that when we show up on the day, everyone's not like scratching their head trying to figure out what I want from them. It lets everyone prepare, come up with their own ideas ahead of time. I do really in-depth ones for commercial because that's part of what they're paying me to do. But everything has to work together. So you'll see an example in a minute. For the commercial mood boards, I'm showing like poses because the poses is the brand like, you know, the happy-go-lucky, then I need to show that in the poses. Or the colors. The color of the background maybe needs to represent the brand. And the same sorts of things I'm thinking about for editorial, but I have a little bit more flexibility in this. So here's a couple examples I'm going to show you. So the picture on the left would be a little bit more on the commercial side. It's still like pretty dramatic, and this is the same model that I shot, I don't know, I probably shot these images 20 minutes apart. These were not for a real client. But the picture on the left could be showcasing skincare, maybe it could be hair, it could be jewelry, if I put jewelry in the shot, like that's the mood of it. Whereas the picture on the right, because it's emotive, because it's dramatic lighting, is more likely to be editorial. But there's not like a clear line. Like there could be a jewelry company that approaches me and says, hey, we like that picture on the right. We want you to do that for us. But in that case, I would have to very much pay attention to, okay, what type of model do they want? What type of jewelry are we showcasing? Would we do heavy makeup or light makeup? Like that's what I'm going through for each of these shoots. Here's another example. Picture on the left, same model, totally different moods. The left would definitely be more commercial. It could be skincare. Maybe I'm showing off the eyeshadow she has on. The picture on the right isn't selling anything. It's just giving you a mood. It's creative. It's putting you in a certain mind space to feel something, right? More examples here. Picture on the left could be a little bit more commercial. Could be skincare, could be fragrance. Picture on the right is definitely editorial. We are playing with shapes and colors and lines. And I was actually inspired because when she came in, that was the shape of her hair. And so I projected a shape of a light on a background to mimic the shape of her hair. But that's because I was the boss. And so I could do whatever I wanted creatively. Versus if it's commercial, someone else is the boss. More examples. Picture on the left. This was actually a model portfolio I shot. The subject wanted a picture that looked more commercial and then wanted another picture that looked more editorial. Notice, commercial, if we're selling something, maybe you want to feel happy and upbeat about it. Editorial, maybe it's a little moodier, a little bit luxury. So I can keep going. This is applicable whether you're photographing men, whether you're photographing groups of people, women, you name it. Now, I just said that there's no definite lines of like what commercial versus editorial are, its intent. I will say there are some modifier choices that tend to be a little bit more in the commercial realm. Like you're more likely to use bigger, softer lights in commercial. Not always, but things like big softboxes or scrims, things like that, umbrellas with diffusion, those are pretty common for commercial shoots. Whereas the work I do, a lot of times you'll see I have like, the little slices of light on the face and bright color gels. Not usually commercial. It can be, but it's very seldom. Also, typically with commercial, there are fewer shadows. They tend to be filled in a little bit more. And that's because you're often showcasing a product, right? If there's a lot of shadows, you can't see the product. And if there is a product in a shot with a lot of shadows, they comped it in, right? Like, so it's like, say it's a perfume bottle and everything's all moody and dark. They lit that perfume bottle separately and then added it to the shot. In fact, that's why when you see celebrity portraits where they're advertising whatever this perfume is and it's all moody on them, and then there's just an overlay of the perfume, it's because they want the bottle to look good but want to make moody pictures of that celebrity. So now I've mentioned, and I say this nicely, commercial tends to be more boring. That's not always, like it's creative challenges in other ways, but there is creative commercial work. If you want it, you have to have a portfolio that represents it. So my point is this, I get hired to do creative commercial work because if you look at my portfolio, it looks like that. But if your work does look all clean, then that's the work people are going to ask you to do. Most advertising clients, ad agencies, brands, they don't want to take risks because they're spending a lot of money. So they want to hire someone, they look at their portfolio and goes, yeah, this person already does that look. You would be surprised like how many times people will hire me or try to hire me for a job and they go, do you have this very specific lighting technique that would not be applicable to anything else, but they want to see it, that I've done it? And it's like, of course I can do it, but they actually want to see it. So just keep that in mind. So here are examples of real commercial clients that I've had where I think these look more editorial. Like I think these look like they would be in a magazine. The picture on the left was actually for a hospital chain out in California that has hired me a few times to do their billboards and their ads. And it's fun because people will send me pictures of the ads I did on the sides of buses. That's always really cool. The picture in the middle was a CBD oil skincare ad. And then the picture on the right was for a diamond company. But what dictated these was not me. It was an ad agency or the brand showing me, we want this. But what was really nice is they said, we want this because we saw that you do it. That's the dream, I think. So my favorite part of the way I've developed my career is I get hired to shoot stuff that I would never tell them this, but I would probably shoot for free for fun. But like, I get paid well, so it's fine. It's good. Okay, so let's take a look at those mood boards that I was talking about. I want to show you specifically what this means. All right, so this is commercial. With commercial, you want to leave nothing up to chance, which means there's not much room for creativity, maybe how you interact with your subjects in the moment, maybe a little bit of composition, but not that much. So for example, we send these out. Sometimes they'll call them creative decks. Other times they call them photographer treatments. It's basically the brand tells me what they want from me, and then I go, here's how I would treat, so my photographer's treatment, here's how I would treat the shoot. So for example, not all those photos are my photos. I'm putting this together to show the vibe of what I want to achieve, like half of those are mine. But like, here's the overall feel of it. Then, next slide, here's the sort of lighting, the sort of expressions, some posing, maybe some crops. Then I'm also showing the background colors, the color of the clothing. Then we're talking about like the exact pairings of people. So this was actually a campaign that I did for Allergan Aesthetics. They're the company that owns Botox and Juvederm, so an aesthetic company. And they hired me to shoot 100 people over 7 days in 2 cities. And they spent a ton of money. I wish more on me. But all the talent and all the sets and all the whatnot, I mean, we couldn't leave anything up to chance. And so I had to put this sort of thing together. And then the ad campaign that came out looked like this. And the idea is that aesthetic and beauty crosses all different types of people, all different age groups, all different ethnicity, gender identity, and whatnot. So this was what part of what the campaign looked like, and just a small snippet. The end result was actually 1,500 photos that I delivered to them, finalized and retouched. But you saw in my mood boards the colors of the clothing, the posing, the emotions, like all of it. So they knew what they were going to get. Okay, so that would be commercial. Now, editorial can be more flexible. I have entire classes about editorial mood boards and how I build them, but I'll just show you a very basic one. And this doesn't have to be for a magazine. This could just be you're building for your portfolio. So for example, last year, was it last year or the year before? Valentino had that pink runway show, and everything was this beautiful fuchsia. And so I wanted to create some images that were timely based on this trend. This was not for a magazine, but I put this together, and what you can see is I've got really, really bright fuchsia background, maybe streaks of light across the background, bright pink to the eyes, like we're just leaning into this pink on pink on pink. So I put this together, and the reason it's helpful is then my creative team could bring pink clothing. They might not have pink clothing unless I ask them for it. And the same thing, makeup artists could bring pink makeup. You guys get the idea. It's like I'm telling them what I need so they can prepare. Here's where some of the end photos, and this was actually on an Adorama TV video that I did about using mood boards. So you can check that out if you go back to the channel. If you saw the mood board, it makes sense. This is where we ended up. The reason I wanted to show you this before we get into demo, because that's up next, is just that I'm going to be focusing on a lighting part of it, but the difference between commercial versus editorial is not just lighting. It's like all the things that go behind it. So that I'm deciding what should the pose look like, what should the expression look like, what about the clothing, what about the makeup. So I'm going to have her in the same clothing, same hair and makeup, and so one will look more commercial versus editorial, but no, it's all of the things together that really make that impact. And the big question is, who's the boss in the end? Like, who made the decision, who's paying the bills? What's the intent of the photo? Is it commercial to sell something, or is it to create a mood for a magazine or for your own portfolio? So that is the big difference between the two. And then let's talk about the gear, some of the gear I'm going to be using today. I'll talk you through what I'm going to be using. First of all, I'm being a gear nerd. I just got this light, and it's so sexy, I swear, it's awesome. Have you played with it? Oh yeah, you did it on the set. It is a 500 watt full color light. So I can change it to any color, and it is so bright. But what's amazing, so this is the Nanlite, it's the FC500. It's a Bowens mount. So you can put on any modifier, which makes it amazing because I don't have to worry about trying to get gels right. Like I can dial this in exactly how I want. So here I'm going to be using 500C. I also have some 300Cs. The other thing I'll be using is I've got Pavo tubes. And I use these all the time for a ton of different reasons. These are the 2-foots. And the other reason I have these is also because they are full RGB. They can do full color. I'm going to be demoing that today because I'm going to go from commercial to editorial. And sometimes the biggest difference between a shot being commercial and editorial is its use of color. Typically with commercial, you're not using creative full color effects. So these are, again, the 15s. And they make ones that are 4-foot. I think they even make ones that are 8-foot. I don't have those. Oh, the ones that are around here are the 8-foot. See, I don't even have 8-foot ones. But I use these as rim lights, usually as rim lights or fill lights, and sometimes creatively as main lights. So those are the main tools you'll see today. And then there's just some different modifiers. But guess what? The modifiers that you'll see, for the most part, are the same ones that you probably use with strobes or speed lights, or you're familiar with. Beauty dishes and soft boxes and things like that. And then I will demo some of this later on. I worked with Nanlite. Oh, we hold this. I worked with Nanlite to create, nice and serious, a kit. This kit has 4 Pavo tubes. It has a Nanlite 60C, so it's a 60-watt continuous light that's full color. And then there's also a Fresnel, which allows you to create focused beams of light. So I will demo some of those. All right, let's get started. Okay. You can kill the lights. Okay, you can't kill the lights. But I'll talk first, and then I'll bring that up. All right, so just a couple of gear things before we get started. I'm going to be shooting tethered into Capture One. Absolutely any time that I shoot tethered, like really any time. Because if it's an editorial shoot, I want my creative team to be able to see everything. I want the hair and makeup to be able to see the shots as they're coming into the computer and make changes. But for commercial shoots, you have no choice. You have to shoot tethered because the client is always approving the shots or making changes to them. So I'm going to be shooting into Capture One, and then I'm going to be shooting the Canon R5 Mark II as my camera, and I've got the 24 to 105 2.8 lens. I use this 80% of the time because it's 2.8, it's super sharp, and it gives me a huge range of focal lengths. Here, however, you can tell I'll be mostly at the 105 length. This might be an instance where it would be good to have like a 70 to 200 or something like that, but this will definitely do the trick. Okay, let me just untangle myself. Okay, will you turn on that background light? Thank you. So for our first shot, let's start with intent. We're going to begin pretending this is maybe a skincare ad, something fresh. And so when I think that, I'm thinking skincare. I want glowy, clean, right? Like that, maybe that's the mood. Of course, this would be based on the brand, but glowy and clean to me means maybe a white background. But what's nice about this is he loves when I say this, in this very nice compact setup. He gets mad at me that I say his studio is small all the time. He's like, what?
It's never good for any of you.
Listen, okay? It's beautiful. But what's nice about this is rude. If you are trying to light a background white in a small space, it can be kind of hard to not get contamination or like low contrast or rim lights that you don't intend. So one of my favorite things to do is a setup like this. So we've got a 500, so it's the FC 500, but I'm not using it at full color. We just have it at like a daylight color temperature. And then I have a softbox. Basically, it needs to be big enough that it covers the surface area you plan on shooting. So you could shoot a 4x6. I don't know, what do you have here, 120? Yeah, no, this is the 90. Yeah, so it's a 90 softbox, not big. And I want to show you why I have it here to begin with. So I'm going to tether up. And another benefit of continuous light is I'm actually going to turn on my display or exposure simulation. So my point is I can see if it looks good before I take the picture. Whereas with strobe, sometimes, it's a lot of checking the exposure as you're shooting. Okay, good to go on that? Okay, so, all right. So what you can see here is that we only have the background light on. this softbox. Look what it does to her cheekbones and her jawline. Like it's just carving. I mean, of course, it's nice that she has those to show off, but that's why you cast models for this, for beauty photography. So what you can see is it is acting actually as multiple lights. It's kind of acting like a background light, or two probably, right? Because it's giving me a pure white background. And then it's acting like I have two rim lights that are carving her out, which is really beautiful. Caroline, can it squish back a little? And I'm going to move you forward a little. I just wanted to show you, this is one of my favorite things for beauty photography, I do it all the time, is the distance of that light from the subject dictates how much that light wraps around. So you see right here, it wraps around so much that it almost hits her nose. You see it? Like the little highlights here? So now, Caroline backed up how far? She backed up 2 inches. She moved forward, I don't know, another like 3-4 inches. Can you scoot this way with the light just a little? So exact same thing, but I've moved her forward, let's say 6 inches or so. And look at the difference between the two. Is I'm changing the amount of wrap of light just by changing her distance to that softbox in the background. So it gives me a lot of control that I personally find a little bit challenging with strip softboxes. Like I find it hard to get just like that right position. So you can actually see it because it's continuous light and I can adjust appropriately. I'll back you up a little. Just like, we'll try there. I'm gonna dial in the perfect distance. Great, great. So I like this because I think it shows off her cheekbones, jawline, carves her out from the background, but is not distracting. So then, for our commercial skincare shoot, I want to add a light that is going to be flattering to her face. So as I'm making these decisions, probably what's more important than the light itself would be the modifier in this case. So I want a modifier that is maybe soft-ish. Like I probably don't want a hard light, maybe a beauty dish. It could be a soft box, but the reason I chose a beauty dish in this instance is it's soft, but it has a little bit of contrast to it. So it's gonna like pop out her features. And you already noticed she has got great cheekbones and jawline. This will help show them off. So I have a white beauty dish, and then what I can do is I can raise or lower the light to sculpt her face more. You'll notice that the light is pretty centered to her face. And the reason I did that is usually with skincare, if you look at skincare stuff, there aren't many shadows. Like just go look at any skincare ads. And I'm not talking about foundation. Sometimes they do shadows to that. I'm talking about like literally lotions and serums and all that stuff. Minimal shadows, it's pretty soft because it just wants the skin to be glowing. When there's shadows, that's when you see imperfections and texture. So that poreless look is when the light is centered and has a fill. So let's start with this light on. I'm centering it on her face, or mostly on her face. Thank you. And this is the 500 again. I'm using it at 5600, which is where I'm going to actually put my white balance so that these color temperatures match. So it'll be a good white balance in camera. Let me take a quick test. Great. Okay, looks pretty so far. So you can see that it's a relatively flattering quality of light. Now, I think it needs to go brighter a tad. And one way you could do this, if you're like, I don't want to guess, is you can look at your histogram. And the other thing you could do is use a light meter. Right now, my camera settings are, I'm at 1/400th of a second. That's basically so I'm not worried about my camera shake. I could go down to 1/200th, but this lens is heavy. I don't go slower than 1/200th because I wiggle a little bit. Next up, f2.8. I might not stay there. The reason I say this is because if it's meant to be skincare, I actually want to see her skin, and at 2.8 it might blur out a little bit. So I don't know, maybe I'll bump up to like, let's try f5. And then because I can see it, because it's exposure simulation, the variable I change is my ISO. I always set my shutter speed to where I know I can handhold it. Then the next thing I change is my aperture based on the depth of field I want. And then my ISO, I don't know, cameras are good these days. Like I just go however high I feel comfortable, which for me is, I don't know, 1600, 2000 ISO. So I'm not gonna go that high if I don't have to, but let's just test. And by the way, these lights are crazy strong. Like what were we at for power before? We were at 75%. So let's see. Let's just check. Try there. Okay, So that looks pretty good. Caroline, let's make this a little bit more carving. Can you bring it in just a little closer to her? And by the way, as she brings it in, anything as it gets closer, it gets brighter, right? But I don't have to guess that because I see it in my camera. And then, yeah, she goes, yep, it's brighter. Okay, good. And I ended up at ISO 800, but now it's a little brighter on her, so I can go down a little. So I like this. And the closer this beauty dish gets to her, the softer the light will be. Just a side note for everybody, there's a little bit of reflections on her head. It's hot in here, right? Like, people are nodding their head. Typically, and those aren't bad, but typically you'd have a makeup artist on set with like HD powder or something powdering down the forehead. Or if you don't like the highlight, you could add a sock and just smooth the highlights out a little bit. He asked if I wanted a sock. No, it's okay. I'm going to make some tweaks. So last thing that I don't think fits the skincare vibe I'm going for is I don't love the shadows. I don't think I'd see skincare with this giant shadow under her nose. Like, I like the cheekbones and I like that it's carving everything out, but it's too heavy. So we're just going to take a bounce reflector. This is a bounce reflector a la Seth. White on one side, and you said you spray painted silver on the other? Yeah. Great. Does the job. Okay, would you actually come to this side, Caroline, and hold it for me? Let's give it a test. So remember, this is commercial. Okay, beautiful. Ooh, so pretty. Yeah, I'll go a tad brighter, but it's good. Okay, awesome. Great. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to match it to a brand, and I'd say that this is skincare. It should be kind of happier. So can I do some fresh ones? And you can include your hair if you want. It's up to you. Good. Give me a little laugh to the light. Perfect. Can I have one hand here? Good. And laugh to the light again. Cute. Okay. So to me, that's giving me commercial. I mean, especially if you, let's say you did this exact same shot, and rather than skincare, she had like a big chunky jewelry on, then see, she's like, oh, rings and jewelry. That to me is selling that for like the holidays. You could make this a holiday campaign. Okay, so commercial. What do we switch for editorial? I'm going to do the exact same setup, but I'm going to introduce funky color. Like that's going to be what I change. So that's one of the reasons I selected these lights, is because they are full color. So we're going to change the background. We're going to dial it in to kind of like a cyan blue, maybe an Adorama blue, if you will. Sure, he says. Great. So we're going to dial that in. And what it's going to do is it's going to give me those same rim lights, but this time they'll have color to them. Sorry to cough, everybody. Okay, so let's check that out. Now, there's some magic here. And look straight on to me one more time. Ooh, yes. So there's a little bit of magic that happens in this setup. Notice she now has beautiful cyan blue rim lights, which I love, but the background is pretty white, right? And the reason is like if you look to your naked eye, like you can kind of see, at least everyone in the audience can see that that's kind of a blue, like you can actually see it. But what's happening is in my exposure, I'm overexposing the background. So what happens is when anything, like literally any color goes so overexposed, eventually it turns white. Like anything that goes overexposed, it's moving closer to white. So that gives you white there, but when it reflects off her skin, it's several stops darker. And so it still shows that color. So that's giving me like a little bit editorial. But then the next thing I see is more shadows, and shadows means an opportunity to add color. So she's got shadows underneath her nose and her jawline. In the previous setup, we added a silver bounce reflector to fill in the shadows. Now I'm going to add color. So let's do these pavo tubes. No, it's fine. I can shoot over it. We're going to turn these on. And by the way, there are apps that you can pair up all of these lights, so you can change it from your app so that you don't have to go in and dial things into an exact color. For example, he says all of this, like all of everything in the studio here that he can turn on and off, he's controlling from an iPad. So which I think is pretty convenient, especially if you're using a lot of lights. Yeah, let's try blue to begin with. Yeah. By the way, I'm using 2 of these pavo tubes here. You could probably get away with 1, but if I did so, I'd have to turn down the power of all the lights in order to have enough output, and I didn't want to do that because I don't want to pick up on any of the ambient light in the room. So if you guys understand how balancing exposures work, that's my thought process. These lights don't need to be that high. I don't want to contaminate with the other light. Okay, cool. So I'm going to lift it up. Got it. Thank you. And then I might, yeah, that looks good already. Okay, cool. Perfect. Ooh, pretty. So see how there's a little bit of blue underneath her chin, right? Let's see, can you raise it up just a little bit closer to her? And I'm assuming those are fine, but they're both 100%, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Right there's perfect. Beautiful. Great, and then can you turn to your side? Yeah. Pretty. Ooh, love. So how it works is anywhere there are shadows, when you add gels on strobes or RGB lights, those colors will show up where the shadows were. So you saw that a few shots ago when we started here, right? See the shadow under her chin? Now you turn on that pavo tube and that's where the color will show up. All right, now, next, if you are considering that, when I tell you this, that shadows allow you to show more color, well, how about more shadows? Means more color. So Caroline's already stepping up to do it.
Slide her up.
Go off to the side. She actually asked me a question. She said, do you want me to go off to the side or up? You blinded. I see everybody go, ugh. Can you come in this way a little for them? I'm watching them all like suffer.
Sorry.
It's okay. How about there? Better? Sorry, you guys over there are screwed. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you guys know how I feel.
Yeah, exactly. She asked me the question, do you want me to go up or over? When she heard me saying I want to add more shadows, because both will add more shadows. Moving it higher up creates more shadows under the eyes, cheekbones, and jawline. Moving it over creates more shadows on the face. So, sorry guys, I'll try not to blind you for a second. You're stuck. Okay, let me just turn it down a little bit. Okay, will you turn this way just a little? Yep, right there. So now, see how there's blue on the front of her face? Let me just brighten this up just a little, same thing. Great. Now, I'm going to turn off these real quick just to show them the difference. So watch what happens when I turn off these two lights. Same exact thing, look that way. Watch the difference. Wherever those shadows were is exactly where that blue color showed up. So if I bring these back together, just to show you, if I got this one, so let's say this one. This would be a very good example of something being commercial versus editorial. Picture on the left is definitely commercial, whether you're selling skincare or jewelry. Picture on the right is getting a little bit more creative. Now I will say, what would sell this even more, like convince you even more, the styling. Like on the right hand side, let's say if she had like a pretty glittered eye makeup that was avant-garde, or like a sparkly headpiece, that would make it more editorial. Or the picture on the left, if she's holding a product, that would make it more commercial. So pretty similar lighting setups, just slightly adjusting, making sure I change the color of things, and then instead of a bounce fill, I use pavo tubes to change the color underneath. So I will pause for questions if there are any, and then I'll move on to the next one. Do you guys have any questions? Huh? Oh, can you pan it again? Thanks, Paul. Yes.
So the softbox you have in the background,
Mhm.
you were saying that, obviously we can see it's not as blue as we see it here. If
Right.
you wanted it to be, how would you accomplish that?
Okay, so the question was, the background to our eyes looks blue, but obviously it's overexposed in the shot that you're seeing, the final shot. So the question was, how could we get that background panel to look blue, but then also still have like the blue on the face? So you would turn down the power of the light, but if the subject is really far away from the background and you turn down that light, it won't be enough to light them. So you would turn it down and have them close. Those two things would get you closer. It still won't be as vibrant or like as bright on their face, but you could definitely get it there. The other is a post-processing thing. So if I go into Capture One, or by the way, I'm shooting Capture One because it's more stable for tethering, but you could do this in Lightroom for sure. If I go in here and I pull in the highlights, do you see how it starts to get some of that color? it's because all of that blue is in the highlights. And then I could also specifically go to blues and pop up that saturation, and that would help a little bit as well. Yeah. Yes.
In the chat, they're asking, does the size of the pavo tube matter?
The size of the pavo tube won't make a huge difference in this setup because it's all lined up in front of her, so it being longer won't benefit you. But if you take them and make it longer, there is more output when it's twice the size. But I think what's more important for this one is the fact that I layered up the two. Again, it wouldn't be necessary if I didn't have to try to overpower the ambient light here. So for continuous light, having minimal or no ambient light is usually preferred. Okay, anything else in that one? Great. Let's go on to the next one. All right, so let's do a different commercial setup here. Caroline, we'll take away that one. What we're gonna do is we're gonna do a kind of like a 3-point lighting setup. And I will show you a basic adjustment to make it from commercial to editorial. And then I'll mess around and we'll try something else really creative with it. Thanks, Caroline. You can take can I help you? You can take that off and put it to the side. What's that? The light you can keep, the softbox you can go away with. All right. So what I'm gonna do is I see two, where are the other two pavos? Are they not? You do? Okay, cool. So let's talk about 3-point light. I'm just passing this to her to make it a little easier. So 3-point lighting is probably the most common form of lighting for like commercial portraits, we'll call it, photographing athletes and whatnot. What it means is there's one main light on the face, and then there's some sort of separation, some sort of rim lights to pop the subject out. With strobes, probably the most common setup would be a beauty dish and then 2 stripped soft boxes with grids. I could absolutely do that with my continuous lights. I'm just gonna steal this from you while you do that. Because as I mentioned, these are Bowen's mounts. Those, the 300C and the 500C. So I could absolutely use these stripped soft boxes as rim lights. This is why it's really nice, is in the past, if you wanted to try to transition from strobes to continuous light, it was really confusing because they didn't have the tools that we're used to. Now it's like, it's the exact same stuff. So anyway, typically it would be a beauty dish as the main light with a stripped softbox on either side. And the point of that is it carves the subject out from the background. So it separates their hair, the side of their body, and the larger the strip, the more even the illumination down the body would be. You could get away with a smaller strip, but bigger would give you a more even light. Same thing was true with the pavo tubes, is we're going to be using 2-foot pavo tubes. This is perfect for head and shoulder shots, even like 3/4. But if you're trying to illuminate someone with nice rim lights head to toe, it's probably a job for a 4-foot pavo tube instead. Reason being is the light is going to be brightest wherever it's closest, which means, let's say it's here, it's going to be brightest on like the side of the face and the arm. And then by the time it lights the feet, there's just not as much output. Basically from the arm to the feet might be twice as far. Twice as far equals like half as powerful. Okay, so let's try that. So you guys can see the difference. Got 2-foot pavo tubes and 4-foot pavo tubes. As a note, this has a grid on it. They make grids for pavo tubes as well. You attach them in the front. They look kind of like the same idea. It basically looks like one of these if you just cut one of these and attached it to it. The reason that that's beneficial is if you're shooting in small spaces, the light doesn't go everywhere. You could like focus it so it's just a rim light. It also helps you out if you have issues with lens flare. So in a space like this, grids are really helpful. You should see his face. He loves me so much.
Big things in here. I don't know what you're...
I'm just particular. Okay, I'm teasing you. It's great. Yeah.
Someone's asking, bicolor or full color is better for editorial or commercial?
If I have the choice, I always go with full color because I have more control. But when you go with full color, you pay for it. So you have to decide if you really need it or not. Keep in mind, depending on the power of your continuous light, even if it's bicolor, you can gel it. It's just, if you gel something, it might melt. So depends on if you don't use full color that often, it might not be worth it. Kind of depends. Thanks. Oh, sliding. Good. Okay. Oh, it did fall on. Okay. It's fine though. All good. All right. So let me just point one more thing to y'all about the beauty dish here. I did want to talk a little bit about my choice of beauty dish. I usually choose beauty dishes because when you add grids to them, it is much easier to control the light. And so I can get a beautiful quality light on the face, but I can control it so, for example, it doesn't also hit the background, right? It just gives me a little more control. I can also do it with a softbox, but I find that the fall off is a little faster, a little nicer when I use it on a beauty dish. Okay, so when I turn on for white light, we'll start with the rims first. And it won't make a huge difference, but the reason we have the two dialed up, the two side by side again, is to give me more output. The 4-foot is going to, you can see it lights to her feet, whereas the 2-foot would probably light to kind of head and shoulders. As she's setting the light behind as well, is she's turning this to white light. On the Pavo tubes or on any of these lights, you can choose whether something is just adjusting the white balance, so basically from tungsten to daylight, or you actually can go further than that, or if you want full color.
Just based on what's going on in the chat, just so you guys know, all full color lights aren't equal. If it has a lot of output, doesn't mean it's actually saturated with that color. So something to look for isn't just output, but how much color you're actually getting with the output. Does that make sense? So I think that's like a misconception. You see something like cheap and it's like super powerful and all full color. Is it really that blue when it's at full power? You know, like you got to think about that as well.
I don't understand the science behind it whatsoever, but it's the same thing as I told you guys, is sometimes when something gets bright enough, it starts moving towards white. Like they're getting more output, but it's diluting the color. There's something behind it, but I have no idea. Okay. And can you just for space, just like give me 1 foot. So you'll notice in this instance now, I won't have the white background, but I'm going to have that similar quality of light with those rim lights wrapping around the face. Looks really nice. Same thing, same kind of ideas we saw in the previous setup. Okay. So what's nice again with continuous lights, it's what you see is what you get. I don't particularly like the highlight on her nose, so I'm going to move her forward just a little bit because in the space I can't move him back that far. Listen, he needs someone to harass him. Can I move it up a little more? I'll go to here. Thanks, Seth. Yup. Thank you. Okay, let's test that again. Perfect. Okay, so I love what it's doing to her cheekbones and jawline. Like, it looks gorgeous. Side note, do you see a little bit of light on her face? That's from this spotlight here. No, I'm not complaining. I'm informing.
No.
Okay. The reason I'm telling you this is there's just that one light in the shot, and it did show up on the face. So that's one of the reasons you really have to be careful if it is continuous light. All right, I'll take another shot since he said, no, I'll turn it off. Thank you. Okay, so makes a big difference, right? If I would have turned on my beauty dish or whatever light source, you may have seen a little bit of this color shift in the shadows. It mostly would have overpowered it though, because it's so bright. Okay, so let's add the beauty dish in. Thank you. Thanks, Caroline. All right. Muscles, yes. Thank you. As a side note, this is no critique of your grip. Typically, it's not. Typically, with my main lights, I usually put them on roller stands, and Flashpoint has some good roller stands that I've gotten here. I also have a couple from like Avenger that are really nice. Basically, they're wider and they have wheels, but if they have wheels, it's got to be wider so it's more stable. But then we can roll it around. So if I want to make little tweaks to the light on the face, which I do, then I usually use roller stands. I think pretty much every time I set up in my studio, we put the main light on a roller.
Yeah, but see, we're so small in here and so cramped.
That's right.
That we don't really need to move the
He
light that
knows.
much on wheels and have
He
these wide bases
knows.
for no reason.
Yes, see?
Oh my gosh, it's amazing.
He knows. Okay, perfect. And then chin this way just a little. Great. Ooh, love it. And now look right into this light. I know it's blinding you. Thank you. Perfect. Okay, great. So you're seeing how this looks kind of like let's say a traditional, let's say luxury portrait, something like that. You could see it being an athlete, could be jewelry. And then the last element that I would ask for the commercial side of it is, okay, what's the brand? That would help me decide what should the background look like. Should it be black because it's dark, it's like a luxury brand? Should it be bright because it's a little more commercial? Should it be a color because it matches the brand colors? And then also, how about those shadows? They're not super distracting, but like if it's a friendly brand, I either want to add another light or a reflector or something. So that's how I make the decision, not because one lighting setup is better than the other. There is no such thing as one lighting setup being better than the other. Doesn't exist. Intent matters. So let's do one with a reflector and then we'll switch it up and go more creative. Okay. Yeah, you look cute. Well, I think that made it much brighter. Pretty. Yeah. She switched it. It looks great though. Let's go a little darker. Can I have the hand a little lower? Yes, pretty. And then can you turn, let's turn that way. Yeah, that's good. And then look up to the light. Pretty. Okay, so now that's the more commercial, still a little dramatic. Let's go for creative. For creative, I would like to use a different modifier on my main light. So actually, in fact, let's use a different light altogether. Do you mind? Seth, can you help on this one? We're just going to take that off, and I don't want to drop your light. Okay, so yeah. So first, I'll take the question because I think someone had one back there, and if not, it's fine. Okay, somebody said, what is the purpose of using both the 2-foot and 4-foot pabo tubes? I just wanted more light output, and I had 2 2 2-foots and 2 4-foots, and that's it. There was no other purpose, just getting a little more output and a little bit more coverage. Yes?
All right, given the intensity of the light and the subject, like the session, you try to wrap it up faster, or?
That's an excellent question. So the question was, given the intensity of light on the subject, how bright it is, do I try to wrap it up faster, right? Because you can see sometimes she's squinting. The only reason I have it so bright is I just want to make sure it's not mixing with the ambient light here. I would put it lower in a real session, so basically to where they're comfortable. So really good question. Yeah.
It's kind of related.
Fine.
Say for when you deal with brands and clients and editorials, do you show them a portfolio first, or would you prefer using a photography rep for that, or just?
That is also a great question. So the question was, when I am trying to reach out to brands and try to get them to hire me, am I going through a rep or am I showing them my portfolio? Well, first of all, I do a million things because anybody pay attention and hire me, right? Like you're trying as many different venues as you can. Most of what I do, or what I do most often, is I send out emails every single month with a different theme. So I'll send out an email one month to skincare and beauty, but it is a curated portfolio. It's not my whole portfolio, it's just like skincare stuff. And then one for hair, and then one for entertainment and whatnot, so that they're getting things that are relevant to them. And like agents can certainly open up access to brands and clients you don't have, but that shouldn't be your only way to connect with people. Awesome.
One more question.
Yeah.
About the lights. Do they have the effects like the amaranth, like the fireworks or the
Yes.
explosions?
Yeah, the question was, do these lights have the effects like the strobe and lightning and fire flicker and stuff like that? Yeah, they have those effects, which is applicable to cinematography. Which one did you do up here? Okay, sorry, that was not what I wanted. Sorry, baby. This is actually what I want, real quick. I'm gonna switch over to an unusual modifier for this last setup. So the lights that we've been using have been like 500 watt lights. I love them. I think they're appropriately priced, but let's just say they're not cheap. Okay, I get it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use a significantly less expensive light here. We're going to use the Nanlite 60C. So obviously we're going from 500 to 60. That is a huge difference. But you notice already, we don't need that 500 to get a good shot. It's really, really bright. The other benefit is with this 60, so it's 60C, so this is also full color, but it is smaller, which is convenient to be portable and whatnot. But the other benefit besides price, besides full color, is that I can use slightly smaller modifiers. So the modifier I'm going to use here is this thing. It's a mini bazooka versus the giant bazooka. So this is called a projection attachment. I'll pass that one to you, and it has the lid on it still. So the projection attachment is awesome because it's a lens. Like you guys can see it. It's an actual lens here, and it allows you to project a pattern or shape. It comes with these things called gobos, and you can buy gobos to project shapes, or it has these shutters, so I can create just like little slices of light on the subject. Like when you look at my editorial work, it's using a modifier, either this or something like this. So they make a version of this for Bowen's mount. So those 500 and the 300Cs, I can put a projection attachment on it. It's just huge. Like it's massive. I don't know how much it weighs, but it's hefty. So in a situation like that, you got to be careful when you're using it because it's heavy, but you also need some super duper heavy stands. What I've actually been doing, I'll pass this to you What I've been doing recently, and I'm actually going to do this tomorrow, I'm photographing a singer with like 6.5 million followers. So like, wish me luck. Okay, pressure's on. But I'm photographing her tomorrow, and I'm going to be shooting around the streets of New York. I want to use my projection attachment on her, on location. So what's awesome is the 60C kits usually include this sort of thing, which is a literal, like you can put the 60C on top, you can put the projection attachment on it, and then you can put 2 specialty batteries here, and you have that little spotlight portable wherever you go. It's awesome. So I think with the 2 batteries that I've got, it'll last like at least an hour. Yeah, right? Like hour and a half. Yeah, and that's at full power, which you're going to see with this projection attachment, because it's a lens, you do not need to be at full power. So, all right, so let me show you. And by the way, I mentioned the gobos. This is what I'm talking about with gobos. If you look at my work and you see like a pattern on the background or on the subject's face, it's this. I'm using these. Go between optics actually fit in the modifier with these little gobo holders. It's a whole system. I love it. So, okay, let's give it a try. Perfect. All right. See? Okay, but you see your face. You went, oh, right. That's the 60C compared to the 500. It's because the lens amplifies the power.
It's only at 29%.
And it's only at 29% right now. So that's what I'm saying is like even 60 watts is a lot if it has the right modifier on it. So for example, in my kit, there's a Fresnel, which is basically a light that allows you to focus and create a hard spotlight on the subject. That increases the output 500% from a 60C. All right, cool. So can you turn down a little more for her? Great. All right, now let's do, can you look this way? Sorry. You can look past it if you need, or close your eyes till we're ready. And then can you sharpen it just a little bit, which I think is going to be here. Good, let's try there. Perfect. And maybe a little off the bottom. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just shaping the light with both the lens moving in and out to sharpen or soften it, and then we're moving the little shutters so that we can create the spotlight we want.
Do you use a light meter?
The question was online, do I use a light meter? I only use a light meter if I need to recreate a setup. If I'm, like the job I showed you in the beginning that was in New York and LA, we did diagrams, we did light meters, we did everything you needed because it had to be consistent. So commercial jobs, sometimes editorial, no. I make it look cool. All right. I think that's a great answer, Seth.
Just sitting here.
Good. Okay, close the shutters for me even more. So you can see how much more dramatic I can make the light. Keep going, keep slicing it. Okay, and then look that way one more time. Yeah, and just slice the front part of her face. Good. Ooh, yes. Cool. Okay, now can you maybe go across just the eyes just to show the effect? We'll do a little old Hollywood eye light. Great. Thank you. Beautiful. And then can you give me a color with it? So I'll do my last adjustment here to wrap it up. I think I'm going to change some things, change the colors a little. Let's do, what color did you go with there? Can you try? Yeah, actually, I'm lying. Can you do white and we'll change this to blue? I'm going to add some fill to her face in the front. And so every place that was shadow will now have a color. I'll just have you hold it for convenience sake. Okay. And because I just cut the power of this, I am going to bring it a little closer, because the closer I bring it, the more powerful it will be. Okay? And I'm just thinking, I'm looking at it, and because, again, this is not commercial, I can do whatever I want because it's creative. I'm just trying to figure out if I want to change those rims to a color or not. Okay, come in real close. Thank you. Let's see, and then look to the light one more time. Caroline, can you hold it vertical? And you can basically get almost in my shot. Can I come right? You come hold right here. I mean, I could probably hold it. I'm just being lazy. Thanks. Cool. Yeah, and by the way, notice when she was holding it over to the other side, it was only lighting the far side of the face, which I do like. But then this here is getting a little bit more light in the front. Okay, here we go. Great, perfect. We'll start. We'll, oh wait, sorry, right here and look back that way. Right there, cool. Great, perfect. All right, so long story short, for this one, I was getting creative with color because I wanted to, and that's what editorial is about, is I can have a little bit more creative flexibility. If this were a commercial client, which I have had ones that have me do, you saw that one skincare brand, the CBD oil skincare serum. They let me do is basically this exact technique. We did teal on the background and teal and blue on the skin because that was the brand colors, right? So there's a lot more input that they'd have, even if they do let you get a little bit more creative. So that is my overview of the differences between commercial and editorial photography. Just remember, commercial, more money, less input over what the final photos look like. Editorial, you get all the freedom in the world, but nobody's really paying you to do it. The perfect scenario is you create enough of these creative editorial images that people hire you to do it commercially, because then you're getting hired to shoot the things you enjoy anyway. So if you guys have any final questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, thanks for joining. Yeah?
So how does the posing change between commercial and editorial?
Sure. The question was, how does the posing change between commercial and editorial? I think, again, it goes back to like, look at the brand for commercial. You know, what are they trying to showcase? Like if they're luxury, you're going to see a lot of the chin up and the strong shoulders. Whereas if they're more fun and accessible, they're laughing and it's a little less rehearsed. Editorial, I think it is often more dictated by the character you've created for the person. Like, are they wearing like a spiky wig and then all the posing is going to be aggressive, versus is it flowing, then the posing is going to be soft. So I think everything works together, but that's why you start with your intent of the photo. Yes?
So clients-wise, do you get more clients who allow you to express your creativity, or you have more clients who like more telling you what to do and then you like work based on there?
Sure. So the question was, for me personally, do I get more clients that tell me what to do, or more clients that let me express my creativity? The ones with more money tell me what to do. I probably get more that let me express creativity, but they are not the higher paying jobs. And I do a lot of creative portraiture that people hire me for. So I'm shooting several sessions a month where I'm basically shooting a model portfolio or personal branding, and they let me get more creative. But it's, a fourth of what I'm getting paid for the commercial jobs.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
I do more weddings, and I hear the term editorial wedding style. Would you be able to translate what they mean?
What do you think? Editorial wedding style. You've also done a lot of weddings. What do you think about editorial wedding style? I mean, I would think that it's either a little more stylized or a little less posed. Basically getting away from, if you picture what weddings were 20 years ago, not that. I think it's also often when they break some of the more traditional rules, like things aren't, there's motion blur or there's some sort of creative effect like that. Would you agree? She shoots weddings, not me.
I also think sometimes it means something
repeat
like
it.
the opposite of documentary style. So documentary style wedding photography is very much about like capturing what the moment really looks like and sort of avoiding posing or directing too much. And editorial style sort of often means the opposite, where you're trying to create art in the photos. You're doing a more stylized sort of fashion forward approach to it.
And for people who couldn't hear that, basically what she said is one style of wedding photography is documentary, right? So it's fly on the wall, you're capturing the moment. Whereas editorial, you're actually posing and crafting a shot, creating art. That makes sense to me. For my own work, I don't call that editorial. I call it stylized portraiture, but it's the same idea. Yeah. Yes.
I wonder what's hot right now. Is like motion blur the new thing?
The question is, what's hot right now? Is motion blur the new thing? In wedding photography, it is, but I don't think it's done all that well. For nope, Seth's agreeing with me.
Because I see it everywhere. Like a
Yeah.
lot of people, they post it.
Well, I'm sorry. Like the reason that we're saying it's not done well is you have to realize the client usually doesn't know what it could look like if done well. They just want something they've seen out there that made someone else 50 minutes of fame with their friends, you know? And that happens a lot with the wedding styles, I find.
Yeah, I mean, the type that I like is if the motion blur really, truly conveys emotion versus it's blurry because they were doing an effect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Anything else? Any other questions online? Or am I, oh, go ahead.
When you're shooting your fun editorial style,
Mm-hmm.
how do you go about finding models? Do you just do casting calls or do you have a strategy?
That is a great question. So if I am shooting editorials, how do I go about finding models? Are you here in New York?
Yes.
If you go to models.com, they list 1 billion agencies. And what I do is I very clearly explain what I'm doing and what I'm looking for. So I will call up each of those agencies, and you only have to do this like once or twice a year. Call up and get the right contact, because if it's just a generic email, it goes to somewhere in outer space and no one responds. But then I show them a mood board. Here's what I'm trying to do. Here's how many images I'm going to compensate the model with. This is how much time I need, and this is who I'm working with for a creative team. I give them all that information, and honestly, some agencies, and I don't mean this as a bad thing, some agencies, when they have new models, it doesn't necessarily matter what you're doing, they just want the models to go practice. So believe it or not, regardless of where you are in the scale, sometimes it's just, let's get that model in front of a camera more. Yeah. You're so welcome. Okay. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me. Hopefully some of you online can join me in person next time. Bye, guys. Thank you. Thank you.